So some teams in non-league play in stadiums that are far too big for them. The reasons for these, some of them share with teams from other sports, other football teams that are much bigger than themselves. Alternatively, they build new stadiums that are just blatantly massive and far too big. We're going to be exploring those in this video, the top 10 teams that play in stadiums that are far too big for them. So this top 10 is going to be ranked on the percentage fill on average of the stadium based on their most recent average attendance stats. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get straight into it with number 10.
The Shay is home to FC Halifax Town, the team that come in at number 10 on this list. There's been a team playing in this stadium under the Halifax Town name since it was formed in 1921. The original club up until 2008, and then the Phoenix club ever since. The capacity is 14,000 with 5,830 seats, but last season there was only 1,726 people in the ground on average, which is good for National League level, but in comparison to the size of the stadium, it's only 12.3% of the entire stadium's capacity. In at number 9 is Gateshead, who've played at the International Stadium since 1977, which is when the club was formed. Though it isn't a popular away day for a lot of National League fans due to the stands being a long way from the pitch due to the athletics track, which is home to Gateshead Harriers, this does detract from the atmosphere in the ground and could play some part in the fact that only 853 people on average were inside the International Stadium for Gateshead matches during the 17-18 season, which compared to their capacity of 11,800 all seated is only 7.3% of the stadium full. Number 8 is a stadium that is currently not home to this team anymore, the first one on this list that falls into that category, and that is Darlington, who formerly played in the Darlington Arena, which is an all-seater stadium they built in 2003 after deciding to move out of Feethams. The Darlington Arena has a capacity of 25,500 seats, which was huge at the time for a club that had ambitions of moving up to the higher levels of the game. But after a few years at the stadium, a total of 9 years later after it was built, there wasn't really any progress made on the pitch, and the high upkeep costs of the stadium led to the club going bankrupt and moving down into the 8th tier, which meant they had to move out of the Darlington Arena and now find themselves in the much smaller and adequate Blackwell Meadows. But throughout their time in the Darlington Arena, their average attendance was between 1,500 and 2,000 fans, which is only 6.8% of the capacity of the stadium. And at number 7 is a really low-level team that play in the 9th tier. It's Coventry United, who play at the Butts Park Arena, and this stand, what a fantastic stand that is. If you think that's the whole stadium, then it's an absolutely unbelievable ground, but yeah, it's just that one stand. The rest of the ground doesn't really have anything. You see some grounds that are three-sided, such as Oxford United, but you rarely see grounds that are one-sided. But that's what the Butts Park Arena is, the home of Coventry United since 2004, and that one stand has 3,000 seats. Total capacity of the stadium is 4,000, but with an average attendance last season for the Midland League Premier side of around 250 fans, it means that their overall percentage fill of the stadium is only 5.6%. It's worth noting though that this ground is a ground share agreement with Coventry RFC. Back in 2009, Lee RMI underwent massive change, changing their stadium and also changing their name to Lee Genesis. Their stadium was the £17.5 million new build, the Lee Sports Village Stadium. Their initial capacity was around 4,700 and actually had a sellout crowd for the first match ever in the stadium, back when they were in the 8th tier, ironically playing against now National League side Salford. But after that, the capacity of the stadium increased to 12,000, but the average crowds dropped drastically to around about 400, meaning their stadium was only around 3.3% full. After 1 year, they realised that it was too expensive to run, so they moved out. For number 5 on this list, we go to 2015, where Hull United were in a feud with their previous owner, Jamie Waltham, who you might recognise as the former owner of North Ferriby United from last year, who created a load more ground issues. Anyway, this is obviously not his first ground issue. When he was at North Ferriby, he tried to move them to Dean Park on the opposite side of Hull. That's exactly the opposite of what he did with Hull United. Hull United were playing at Dean Park back in 2015, but after Jamie Waltham left the club, he still owned the stadium and he didn't want the club to play there anymore. So they had to pretty quickly find a new ground, and that new ground was Craven Park, the home of Hull KR. The side that were in the Humber Premier Division, the 11th tier of English football, had crowds of 300 to 400 during their short spell at Craven Park, a capacity of 12,225, so therefore only 2.9% of the stadium was full during this time. Number 4 is Wakefield FC, who moved to Bellevue, the home of Wakefield Trinity Rugby Club, after AFC Emley were relocated to Wakefield in 2000. The stadium had a capacity of 9,333 and the club stayed there until 2006, but actually returned to the ground in 2012 for a final 2-year stint until 2014, where the club were wound up. In their final season at Bellevue, Wakefield had an average attendance of a mere 87 spectators, so that means that it was less than 1% of their ground that was full. Only 0.93% to be exact. Manchester Central FC are a newly formed club, only founded in 2015, and they played at the Manchester Regional Arena. They're an ambitious club, and they chose this ground because it had suitable ground grading for higher levels, so if they were to get promoted they wouldn't need to find a new ground. It's also the home of the Man City Reserves and women's teams, and Northwich Manchester Villa, another football team in the lower leagues, played there during the 15-16 season. But Manchester Central are an 11th tier side, playing in the 6,500 capacity stadium, but there's been less than 50 at their games so far this season, meaning only 0.077% of their stadium was full. Now into the top 2, and at number 2 is Widnes FC, who play at the Halton Stadium and have done since 2012. It's the home of Widnes Vikings Rugby League Club and also the home of Liverpool and Everton ladies teams. It holds 13,350 spectators all seated, and the 8th tier side have had an average attendance last season of less than 100. Meaning only 0.75% of the stadium is full. And finally, in at number 1 is a familiar stadium to people in the higher levels of the game, but an unfamiliar team. It's AFC Vardinians, who play at Withdean Stadium, formerly the home of Brighton and Hove Albion, when they reluctantly moved there as their temporary home ahead of their move to the Farmer Stadium in 2011. It's been the home of AFC Vardinians since 2015, and it's a mishmash of porter cabins and stands behind an athletics track. Very, very odd ground with not a huge amount of atmosphere, especially when you consider that it's an 8,850 capacity stadium. When AFC Vardinians are rarely getting more than 30 people in attendance to their matches, it means that the percentage fill of the stadium is only 0.34%, meaning 99.66% of the stadium is totally empty. And it's quite a contrast really from when Brighton were there, because when Brighton were there, the stadium was full pretty much every game and it was not big enough for them, whereas AFC Vardinians, it is way too big for them, so is the most empty ground in non-league football.
So you have it, that is it for this top 10 list. If you enjoyed the video, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. If you can help me try to get there, that would be awesome. And yeah, was there any teams that I missed out in this list, or was there any that you're really surprised about and didn't know about? Let me know in the comment section down below. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.